The Agenda with Steve Paikin is presented by
Vale Inco Limited, a pioneering nickel mining company transforming mineral resources into essential ingredients for everyday life. Ontario's 33,000 chartered accountants, public policy leaders since 1879. More information is available at casforchange.ca.
Welcome, everybody, to the Regional Municipality of Waterloo. You know well its post-secondary institutions. They're well known across the province of Ontario, but they've got other things here as well. The Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics. And you no doubt know about the high-tech part of the economy, which is so much the backbone of this region. You may also heard of a little company called RIM. I think they make the BlackBerry. And we're in CIGI tonight, the Centre for International Governance Innovation. And we're happy to welcome you to our broadcast this evening on TVO as well, and hope you're dialing us up, if not on television, then online at tvo.org. I want to thank people who've come from the region of Waterloo and points beyond for being in our audience tonight. They signed up at our website, tvo.org/theagenda. Those of you watching at home, if you want to get more involved in the broadcast, we're happy to take your emails, your comments, your questions at theagenda@tvo.org, or you can reach us via Twitter, and the address is at the bottom of the screen. Anybody tweeting in here yet tonight? This would be the place if it were going to happen, I'm sure. You can also join our live blog at tvo.org/theagenda, hosted once again by Mike Miner, who's our fifth column blogger. Mike will be updating us on your chats throughout the evening. Now, just some background before we start. This is the fifth of 5 Agenda on the Road shows that we have done across the province of Ontario. We've really had a great look at our province. It all started last October. We were in Windsor then, and then Sault Ste. Marie, and then Kingston, and Thunder Bay, and we have examined several of the province's economic sectors on television and online, and with our agenda camps, such as the one we did yesterday at the University of Waterloo, which brought together business and community leaders, policymakers, and engaged citizens to discuss Ontario's innovation economy.
I think that the Canadian government should pay more attention to get undergrads involved in entrepreneurship. It's the only solution towards that is to really pay more investment in terms of having these conferences. Events like these are really amazing for people to come together, get brilliant ideas and share these among your peers. And that's what entrepreneurship is. It's a mindset.
And talk about risk-taking in general and putting in a culture of risk-taking in universities.
It's about society's attitude towards the person taking the risk.
Do we have a society that promotes, that enhances the whole role of innovation?
And we'll update you on yesterday's Agenda Camp a little later in the broadcast tonight as well. Let's introduce our guests, and they are John Wilkinson. He is Ontario's Minister of Research and Innovation and the MPP for Perth Wellington. Richard Florida, co-author of the recently released report, Ontario in the Creative Age. He's with the Martin Prosperity Institute at the University of Toronto. Sheila Block is Research Director at the Ontario Federation of Labour. And the man who's sort of our host tonight, Jim Balsillie, co-CEO of RIM and the founder of the Centre for International Governance Innovation, the site of tonight's broadcast. And as I welcome all four, I shouldn't really be welcoming you. You really are welcoming us here, but everybody, good to have you alongside for the broadcast tonight. Some statistics just to set the table for our discussion that is to come. For example, the importance of this region to our overall economy. The GDP in Waterloo, $21.5 billion. Sounds like a big number. It's actually 4% of the province's economy. Major economic sectors include automotive, advanced manufacturing, business and financial services, and high tech, of course. But emerging economic sectors include biotechnology, health sciences, environmental, nanotechnology, and pharmaceutical. $347 million in private sector and $200 million in public sector R&D expenditures, those numbers from 2005, and they have a whopping 150 research institutes in Canada's technology triangle. Okay, Richard Florida, get us started. We're talking about the innovation economy tonight. For those who don't know what that is, what are we referring to?
Well, what a remarkable success story right here in Waterloo. Who would have thunk it 20, 30 years ago that in a place like Ontario, which had a great agricultural history and made a lot of whiskey, and then had a fabulous history in agriculture, that out here, away from a major city, with this great little foundry called the university, that high tech could emerge. And that's what it is. And right now today, with our team at the Prosperity Institute, we just looked at this. I know they helped you out yesterday. But actually, the high tech creative economy, which is innovation, entrepreneurship, arts, culture, and all the rest, and professionals, that's actually the equivalent in terms of share of the workforce, 28%, to what the working class is. Well, you think about that. We are really shifting our economy now from an older industrial economy to a new innovation economy. And across Canada and across North America, this place is right at the frontier.
Well, let me put some numbers up and see if that's, in fact, as much the case as you say it is. Because if we look at employment by industry, these numbers are from Statistics Canada. Manufacturing is still at the top of that chart at 24%. You've got trade at 15%, business, finance, and insurance at 12%, healthcare and social assistance at 10%, educational services at 9%, the service industry at 8%, construction at 6%, scientific and technical, which is what everybody thinks of when they think Waterloo, only comes in at 5%. Do we have the wrong impression of this place?
Well, scientific and technical, about 5%, is right at the national average, and in fact, it's pretty darn good. But when we talk about the workforce composition, that's talking about what companies do. What we like to do at the Prosperity Institute in our work is look at what share of the workforce. That's what's important. What are the jobs, really? And they're about 28%. And in Waterloo, in this place, in this city and region, 44%. That's almost at the North American frontier. That's up there with Silicon Valley and Washington, D.C. and places like that. So when you're looking at what workers do, about 28% in manufacturing, construction, and transport, blue collar, about 28% in the region in high-tech, arts, culture, design, creative, and management, business and management. But in Waterloo, already 44% in those creative and innovative
So
jobs.
they are leaders here.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are. Okay, you three stand by. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to introduce our web team, because throughout the course of the evening's broadcast, we're going to get updates from these guys. David Irwin on the left, Mike Miner on the right. Mike, I'm going to ask you to sit tight for a minute, because I expect the chiming in is just starting right now, and we'll get an update on that in just a bit. Dave Irwin, yesterday, Agenda Camp. Fill us in.
Well, Stephen, yesterday's Agenda Camp was the 5th of 5, and it was one of the most insightful Agenda Camps of all, with conversations looking at how a community can help stimulate the innovation economy and creativity. And what they really started talking about were the factors that allowed success to happen within this triangle. And here's a few of the conversations that took place.
Let's take a look.
We have world-class academics in this province and right across this country, not for the purposes of invention. We have world-class academics to form the next generation of highly creative, highly well-educated HQP. It's all about highly qualified people.
The role of universities as generators of innovation is where we're placing our money.
University of Waterloo is the most innovative university in Canada. Well, you agree with that or not? It's been voted that for the last 10 years.
There are a lot of small companies in this region that are still making stuff, right? Hero DevTech is machining landing gear for aircraft. Christie is building projectors. You see a Christie projector there in the main hall today, right? And they're hiring people to work on the floor. Our labor force really reinvests in itself. If they need new skills, they'll straight back to school and upgrade and get them, right?
You have serial entrepreneurism, right? So in other words, the person finds their success in their community and then they give back to their community. Waterloo's a great example of where that's happening.
Some of the stories at yesterday's Agenda Camp that was held at the University of Waterloo. Okay, Mike, you keep an eye on what's happening online. I'll be back to you in a few minutes' time, coming over here. Okay, Jim Balsa, let's put you to work right now. If you had to break down all of the factors which were important in Waterloo's success, what's at the top of the list?
I'd have to say it's the universities. I think the relationship with Waterloo and Laurier, and just the collaborative relationship with the co-op and the highly applied nature of people, but obviously in a very high standards university. I think it's access to people is the key.
Other cities, though, have post-secondary institutions that are also very good. What's different about what's happening here that may not be happening there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I think maybe, I think they had a real nature of making it applied, making it cooperative, encouraging people to start the firms, encouraging professors to be involved. So I think there is a cultural bias of them. They weren't sort of pure research for the sake of research type of institutions. They're very applied in their genesis. University of Waterloo was, really.
And the profs can own their own stuff here, too, can they not? They have an intellectual proprietorship over their own material?
Yeah, I think there's commercialization aspect that was an early element and an important one. I think the missing link in that is sophisticated intellectual property training and strategies, and I think that's the hugest gap we have to go to the next level, but I think a predisposition to allow commercialization in a thoughtful way was a key early aspect, for sure.
Minister, what do you see working here?
Well, Steve, this community has a history going back over 100 years of reinventing itself. You know, David Johnson will tell you, the president of the University of Waterloo, that 100 years ago, this was the button manufacturing capital of the empire. I don't know if everybody remembers the British Empire, but that's what it was. And so successively it's reinvented itself, and the community has this ability to do that and to come together and rally around. All communities have to do that. I mean, that's just the nature of our society. But some adapt sooner and quicker and actually lead the way and are able to give a great example, a shining example to other communities. But this is happening all across Ontario.
Sheila, what do you see when you look at what's transpiring here?
I think we really have to look at the very mixed nature of the economy in Kitchener-Waterloo. You've got 25% of the employment in manufacturing. I'm wondering whether the proximity to people who actually make goods and services actually supported innovation. I think there's also a really interesting collaborative history here. I'm not sure whether it's from the Mennonite farming community or where exactly it comes from. In all the literature that I've been reading about it, everybody talks about the collaboration among entrepreneurs, which I think might be a bit unusual, and within the community to try and really pull together. And they are having some very hard times at the moment. I don't want to prejudge your data here, but I understand that you'll be talking about how the unemployment rate here is actually higher than the national average. It's interesting that recently the job losses actually have been spread beyond manufacturing. So I think that capacity for the community to pull together will be very important as we go through these hard times.
They talk about a tale of two cities actually here. Waterloo on the one hand, reaching for the stars. Kitchener on the other hand, having some tough times, having lost a lot of manufacturing jobs. Is what's happening here different, special from what's transpiring elsewhere in North America, Richard?
Not necessarily. I think it's what's happening in North America in a microcosm. We're going through the greatest economic transformation in all of human history. I mean, this is a bigger transformation than when we moved from an agrarian society to an early industrial society, because in that old industrial society, we still used raw material and physical labor to make most of the things. So we moved people off the farms, but we put them in manufacturing jobs. We swapped low-skill job for low-skill job. Now we're moving to an economy which is premised and powered by innovation, entrepreneurship, the human mind. I like the word creativity, but call it what you will. Well, that's going to have enormous effects, adjustment effects on people. You know, my dad had a 7th grade education. He worked in a factory for 50 years. And he told me as a young boy, get an education, it's going to be the only thing. And you know, have more than one job. But get an education, have more than one job, that's the only thing that's going to carry you forward. I think that adjustment that we're having now, where so many people who fit well into the older physical skill economy, and in fact, we paid a lot for those skills in Canada, that adjustment is painful, and we've got to make it work for us. We've got to make it work for everyone, because we're not going to build an economy just on an innovative elite. We've got to make it work for every single person.
Jim, I know you've told this story a million times, but tonight's going to be 1,000,001, because there will be some people who don't know the story of how you started RIM with Mike Lazaridis. Where did it all begin?
Mike started the company. We became partners 18 years ago, just under 18 years ago. And really the fundamental premise was a bet on the convergence of mobility and digital data. We didn't quite know exactly how it was going to work out. And as I sort of say about business stories, you navigate cascading circumstances, and if it works out all right, you use revisionist history to act like you knew it was going to happen all along. So we just bet on mobility and digital data. The convergence, and then we just navigated very, very well. Lots of bobs and weaves and twists and turns that were, you know, a bit surprising. Nobody foresaw the email coming as it was. Nobody foresaw the efficiency of componentry. Nobody saw the proliferation of online access standards like the internet standards and so on. And you know, and so the intensity of it and the exact nature of it is always impossible to predict, but the key is the fundamental call was good. We resourced well. We got good people. And
where'd the money come from?
Well, you know, and I think that we actually, I mortgaged the house, and we got some from the Ontario Innovation Fund, which was very important, a venture fund that had a prescribed basis of payback, and we used bank financing. That was pre, big venture funds and all this kind of stuff. You're much more bootstrapped back then. So it was a different era. But I think the universities, the community, the government played a real supportive role.
Well, that takes me over here. Do we have the programs in place? Do we have the culture of innovation in place so that the next young kids who come along and say, sorry, not to suggest you're not still young, but the next guys who come along and say, you thought the BlackBerry was kind of neat? Look what we've got. They've got a shot at it.
Well, Steve, 4 years ago the provincial government created the Ministry of Research and Innovation, actually to prepare for the future. That's what the ministry is all about. How do we make sure that if someone in Ontario has a great idea, that it becomes great jobs? It's important for all of these ideas to become the jobs of the future. And to do that, you have to be quite directed in government. And so, the interesting thing about Jim's company is the fact that he's constantly making it better. You could have stopped when you had your first breakthrough. But there's a culture at RIM, and there's a culture in so many companies around Ontario, the ones who are finding global success, because they're always making their product better. That's part of a culture. That's a culture that we need to have throughout all of Ontario. The ability to, what we call, seize global opportunities. Jim and Mike and their company have found success because they tapped into a global market. And so if we're going to have the backside of globalization, we're experiencing that today, these forces that are roiling over our province. We need to make sure that we take the best side of it, which is if you can come up with a great new idea and the world wants it, they will beat a path to your door. The world is beating a path to so many companies, beating a path to the door of so many companies right here in this region and right across Ontario. That's where the future is. And you have to embrace innovation.
I'm going to beat a path to Ginny DeBenko's door right now. She's the Dean of the Business School at Wilfrid Laurier, one of the post-secondary institutions we talked about off the top of the program. Okay, young people who want to find the seed money to take their idea to the next level. How possible is it nowadays?
That's the magic question right here, and we have hundreds of them. We actually have an MBA in Innovation and Entrepreneurship. We give course credit for starting your own business, so we're turning them more and more out every single day. And to be honest, for us right now, it's love money. So that's friends, relatives, neighbors who fund. We desperately need institutional help.
I've heard it described as the 3 Fs who usually contribute first: friends, family, and fools. Is that the way it works?
I don't know. There's been some phenomenal successes here, so you can call him a fool, but he might be wealthy someday.
That is true. Well, let me go to 3 guys. Thank you for that, Jenny. I want to go to 3 guys who, I don't know where your money's come from yet, but stand up, guys, if you would, and you're going to introduce you. These are 3 young guys who hope to be as rich as Jim Balsillie someday. You are.
My name is Kartik Singla, and I'm a student at University of Waterloo in mechanical engineering.
And
my name is Saif El Tamimi. I'm a student at the University of Guelph for environmental engineering.
My name is Yusuf Farawi, and that's it.
Yusuf's going to have the radio career someday.
I'm in grade 12.
You're grade 12. Okay. What's the idea that you guys are working on?
Basically, we realized that the organic industry is booming and it's doubling every single year. So we wanted to create an awareness about the organic fashion industry. So we came up with the idea, and it's called Recently Divorced. It's about divorcing your old self and starting brand new. So really, it's a movement in itself to encourage young people to really leave their past thinking behind and accept this new idea and new way of doing things, and it's okay. And you're accepted, and people like that, and people will accept that. And we've seen that the trend actually evolve, and on a lot of social networks like Facebook and YouTube, there's people talking about us, and they love it.
Okay, have you got this to the point yet where you're manufacturing, you're out there, or where's it at?
We've got some samples in design. We have designers working on these samples. Right now we're at the branding stage. We're trying to get the word out. We're trying to establish this brand, Recently Divorced, and what we're all about. So that's where we're at right now.
You need money, right?
Definitely, that's what we need.
Where are you getting money from right now?
Well, we have this small-time investors that are just pitching in some money. We have a system where
is he a family friend or a fool?
Well, basically, I would say the money is actually coming mostly from people that are willing to help us out. Actually, there's a web company called akpro.net, and they did a lot of our website work just on Goodwill, and it's collaborations like that that are really helping us go forward. But at the end of the day, we would need money. I mean, the vision that we have and the goals that we've set for ourselves.
There's the minister. Go talk to him after the show. Okay, see ya. Thanks, guys. Okay, let's bring in Mike Miner here. Mike, you've been monitoring what's happening online. Tell us all about it.
You said earlier that you would wait for a bit for it to get started. This has been humming along since 7 o'clock. We have a really interesting group of people, a lot of whom were at Agenda Camp yesterday, but there's some people who couldn't be here. We have one guy named Neil who's particularly interested in figuring out how all of these different regions around the world can get together, and it's particularly interesting because he's watching from Auckland, New Zealand. So, clearly he's making his effort. We also have people on from San Antonio, all along the west coast of Canada. J.S. Rancourt, who's in Ontario, he wants to know, are venture capitalists still the effective way to go as far as the future for startups in other fields in Kitchener-Waterloo? Tim is asking about what's lost when we focus on innovation. He's worried about culture being paved over in an attempt to move forward. And that's, there's
okay,
a lot
that's a good thought. I actually want to run with that. Mike,
Okay.
keep watching. We'll come back to you later in the program. Sheila, is that stuff you worry about, this notion of whatever the new innovation economy is, it paves over that which preceded it?
I think we have some big concerns about the innovation economy, and I think what we really need is we need an institutional framework that makes sure that innovation is something that contributes both to environmental health, that it contributes to a wide sharing of the effects of that through minimum standards. One of the things is minimum employment standards that we want to be looking at, environmental standards. There's been a lot of talk about the need for venture capital and for capitalization. I think an appropriate financial regulatory environment is really important. We're seeing the impact of that. So those are the issues that I think we really need to look at. And I think we also need to be clear about the great diversity of the Ontario economy and be clear that we have to support many different sectors, including the innovative sector.
Okay, Richard, what do you say to this?
I agree with Sheila entirely. I mean, look at what's happened in Ontario and Canada compared to the United States, where you can have access to health care, you have a functioning social insurance system. People aren't, I mean, we were just back in Detroit, where my wife Ron is from. People are anxious to the point of mental collapse in the United States. So without a social safety net, without health care, you got nothing.
Is there a place for unions, though, in this new, more nimble world? There is.
Absolutely, and we'll come back to that in a second. But in an innovation economy, you download risk on the individual. And the institutions that used to mitigate that risk, large corporations, large unions, become smaller and smaller. So you have to figure out a way. This is what Obama is trying to figure out in the United States. It's what we're trying to dialogue with in Ontario. How do you create a social welfare system or social safety net for the creative age? Look, unions played a huge role. My dad told me a great story. But I think we got to do this for the service economy now, where 44% of those jobs are. My dad said he took his job in manufacturing in 1934 when he was 13. He had a terrible job. It had paid nothing. It took 9 family members to make 1 family wage. He had no benefits. He had no health insurance. He had nada. He came back from World War II and he said, Richard, magically, I was transported after the efforts of unions, collective bargaining, the Roosevelt administration, into a great job where I could put you 2 boys through college and you can get an education. I think where we've got to start to focus attention in this province, in this country, and in North America is that 44% of the jobs in the service industry, which pay much less than working jobs and far, far less than creative and innovative jobs. What we have to do is take the same principles that make RIM successful or great manufacturing companies successful, good management, engaging workers fully, executing and tapping people's minds, and we have to begin to transform those jobs into the same kind of job that propelled my dad in a manufacturing job 50 years ago.
Do you think there's anything inconsistent between the new innovation that we're seeing, the new innovative economy, and the union movement?
No, I don't think so, because unionism is an expression of our democracy. We have a right to do that. I think the key thing is, how is manufacturing going to transform itself? And where is the merger between manufacturing and service? And I give a great example in the world. There's a company called Rolls-Royce, and they make jet engines. And so they made their money making these incredibly complicated machines that let us go around 6 miles up in the atmosphere and get from A to B. They came up with this innovative idea that they would actually service the engines while they were in flight, improving safety and improving the economics of having a jet engine. So every Rolls-Royce engine in the air today is being monitored by people in the service industry in the United Kingdom. So there's this new paradigm out there that allows the service imperative and the manufacturing imperative to come together. And jurisdictions that can figure that out are going to do very well in the 21st century.
Let me go to Jim Balsillie on this. You are apparently seeing something in this economy that I think few others are. You put a call out the other day for 3,000 new hires.
Yeah, well, we hired about 4,000 people last year, and we're still hiring now, and we just hired a few hundred last month.
Everybody else is shedding jobs. What are you seeing that apparently nobody else is?
This is like saying you're making great timing driving to the airport. You should be there early, so it makes me a little nervous to talk about it. We're doing okay. I mean, we've got a good product set. We've got a good sector, the smartphone, the wireless information appliance. We've got a leadership position, so it's become an essential to people. It's emerging. So, a lot of the trends are with us, and our position as well, and our capacity to execute and navigate as well. And we feel very, very fortunate, but nothing's certain in this business environment. So I don't want to tempt fate too much.
No, I hear you, but do you get a little nervous putting a call out for 3,000 new employees when you see what the rest of the world is doing?
I don't get nervous a lot, no. It's a character flaw or something, I don't know.
Okay. Listen, we're about halfway through our discussion tonight. Let me just remind everybody who's watching us at home or online, this is part 5 of the Agenda on the Road. We're in Waterloo, Ontario tonight, taking a look at the innovation economy. We're happy to take your comments or questions at theagenda@tvo.org. You can get to us via Twitter as well. We're happy to be on TV and online in your life this evening. Let's go to Chapter 2 of our discussions here. One of the things that people asked me a lot at yesterday's Agenda Camp is what's happening here able to be put in a bottle and transported elsewhere? What do you think, Richard Florida?
No.
It's not?
Absolutely not. Wherever technology or innovation or creativity has emerged, it's come out of local conditions. So, yeah, you could say in Waterloo and in Silicon Valley, there was a great university. But, I taught for 17 years in Pittsburgh, and we had Carnegie Mellon, a university that used to compare itself and benchmark itself to Waterloo. And it's happening there, but not at the level. I think there's something fundamental that Sheila talked about, the minister talked about, Jim talked about. And I always find in these roundtables I learn something. That's the key role of management in the innovation economy. What made RIM great and what allowed this to take off from the university technology was the combination of a Jim and a Mike, combining technology and management. We were just talking about bands, Jim and I, and a band called U2.
Heard of them.
And Jim said to me, well, they're businessmen. Well, that's what we're finding in our research. Where the successful artists and bands are, they understand how to manage. Great companies. The problem with GM wasn't that the workers aren't great. The workers are phenomenal. It was that the company's been mismanaged. So this emphasis on management and how blending management in manufacturing, working, innovation, high-tech service, and making more of an emphasis on having people who can manage and execute and build companies, that's got to be a number one priority.
And I think this is the essential vulnerability, because as we talk about where we can generalize this, I think that, in fact, the nature of the game that we're in is, in fact, changing here. And I think the presumption that this is just given is incredibly naive. And when I look at our business, the two essentials in a management construct, I mean, when we talk about innovation, the most important aspect of innovation right now is the evolving rights and rents regimes that are out there. There's intellectual property and trademarks. A company like RIM has 200 to 300 active IP files. We'll pay up $1.5 to $2 billion in IP rights this year.
How much?
Around $1.5 billion.
Billion.
To $2 billion, yeah. And so this is an enormous aspect of the management exercise, which we, quite frankly, do not train people in this country for. And yet the president's wife is, in fact, an intellectual property lawyer in the United States, and it's replete with that. And I was just in D.C. on patent reform last week for a couple days. The second aspect of this is we're much more impacted by the vagaries beyond our borders. You just look at Canada, you look at the swings in energy prices, the swings in the border, the swings in currencies, the swings in the credit crisis, the swings, the emergence of China and all that. This element of understanding what's going on beyond your border, being able to anticipate, being able to navigate it, and actually being able to shape it is increasing at a quantum. So, understand that the skills to be successful yesterday are in fact changing right now, and I'm deeply focused and concerned that we have to dramatically enhance these two new rapidly emerging aspects to have this management quotient even in Waterloo for this innovation economy for this next 5 or 10 years.
Well, you heard about this. What are you guys in the position of doing?
Well, I agree because, you know, we always say in the 20th century, if you could come up with a local solution to a local problem, you'd have a company and you do quite well in your local economy. But in the 21st century, in this globalized world, if you can just come up with a slice of a solution to a global challenge, the globe beats a path to your door. But what Jim is talking about is now we're in that big global world. We have to understand that world. We have to engage in that world, and we have to have a door so that that world can understand us.
I understand.
It's part of what Jim's doing right here at CIGI.
But everybody, yes, everybody wants to beat a path to Waterloo, but they want to take what's happening here and they want to transport it all across the province. And my hunch is that part of your job involves going all over this province and saying to people, here's some money for this, here's some money for that. But you can't just pick this up and move it everywhere, can you?
No, and I agree with Richard. It is unique. Every community. This isn't something that's transportable. It's something that grows within a community. You have to have a culture that allows these little shoots of ideas to come up, and you have to nurture them. But in each economy, in each community, it's different. You have to be able to recognize that, and it isn't about trying to get some kind of cookie-cutter photocopier and say, well, here's the formula and move it. You have to have the big pieces right, but you have to allow innovation to happen. Because innovation is just about taking great ideas and turning them into great jobs. That's how we found success in the past. So you have to be able to recognize that in each and every community.
Okay, we talked a lot about this yesterday at Agenda Camp, where you were at, Minister, for the whole day. Let me go over to David Irwin one more time. David, let's roll some tape on what took place yesterday. What do you got set up for us now?
Well, Stephen, most of the conversations at Agenda Camp focused on community solutions that would help spur creativity and help the entrepreneur. But they wouldn't all agree that it would be easy to transport either, because there was some conversations that just focused on the roadblocks to innovation and the hurdles people had to overcome. And this is a little of what was said.
All of this innovation or invention is happening in silos, so we're not dispersing that across. We're not saying, you know, what were the lessons learned and how could that be applied across different industries.
Everything's against you. Everything, you can't get qualified, your qualifications don't matter. There's a culture of, we'll support you as soon as it's looking like it's a success. The culture is, we will not support you until it looks that way, and we'll actually jump in your way to stop innovation and moving forward. That's my experience.
Although Waterloo Region itself is seen as a success, and that our unemployment rates used to be among the lowest, now we're third highest in Ontario. I think that's the kind of thing that we need to remember. We are an innovative community. There is a good sense of community here and a good sense of loyalty to our community, but we cannot forget about the whole group of people who are not being taken up and utilized constructively in what we see as this move from a manufacturing-based to a knowledge-based society.
More excerpts from yesterday's Agenda Camp, which took place at the University of Waterloo all day yesterday. Mike Miner, you stand by. I'll be over there in a few minutes to get up to date on more of the chat. I got the mayor standing beside me right here, Mayor Halloran from Waterloo. Just before I ask you a question, I want to put some numbers up here.
Yes.
Michael, here's the unemployment numbers for the Kitchener-Waterloo area, which may surprise people. They think of this as the technology triangle, and yet look at this, 9% unemployment. How does that stack up across the rest of the province? It's higher. How does it compare to the rest of the country? It's higher. Can you explain those numbers to us? Because we think the unemployment rate, because everybody here works in high tech, must be 2%, but it obviously isn't.
Well, it all depends on what area of the region that you're looking at for those figures and those statistics. In the city of Waterloo, it is a bit different here because we do have different jobs, different technology, different opportunities for people. So our unemployment in the city of Waterloo is less than the other region's cities.
Is it a tale of two cities, though?
I think it's a tale of a region and what's happening in this area. We as a city are really proud to have the opportunities that are presented to us by the technology industries, by the universities, and all the opportunities that come with it. So I think, as Jim has said, we don't rest on our laurels. We're always aware that things can change in a minute, but what we do here is look for those opportunities, strive ahead. We have a culture of collaboration, and we try to succeed and help everybody else succeed. The success of our city is the people.
Okay, Your Worship, thanks a lot for that. Sheila, when you hear this tale of two cities, where do you want governments and private sector to focus?
I think we have a number of areas where we need government to focus. We need to support the manufacturing industry. We know that there are a lot of firms and companies who, under normal circumstances, would be viable. They can be viable again, and we know that manufacturing comes down and comes up. In 2004, after the recession in the early 80s and in the early 90s, we had higher manufacturing employment in Ontario than we had since 1980. So this is an important sector that will come up again. That's really important. We need to, in terms of the kinds of things that Richard was talking about how do we support those service sector jobs. There are some clear policy changes we've been looking for that will make it easier to unionize in the service sector, where women are concentrated, where racialized people are concentrated. That's another area that we really need some movement on. And
okay,
then,
let me put some of those thoughts, if I can, to Richard Florida. You saw today an enormous auto bailout package going forward here in Canada. The United States is looking at similar things. That's what she was talking about, putting our money behind manufacturing. Is that the way to go in your view?
I'm not a big believer in bailing out anything. If you've mismanaged your company for 20, 30 years, why do you deserve a bailout? Now, helping those workers, helping those communities adjust, making sure that they have a go, absolutely. But manufacturing has been exposed in every recession, and it's going to be exposed again in this recession. Innovative work, high-tech work, business work has much lower levels of employment and is much less cyclical. And I think, I think we've got to get away from the manufacturing versus the working class versus dialogue. We can grow the whole economy here, and we're in a great position to do it. And where Sheila and I have real common ground, we have 44% of our workforce in the service economy. Creators are 28, high-tech innovators are 28, manufacturing 28. Let's have some conversation about the 44%. That pays 3 times less than a creative job and about half of the manufacturing job, more or less. We've got to make those jobs good jobs because, manufacturing work can be offshored. Even some of high-tech work can be offshored. The person who cuts your hair, the person who cuts your lawn. What are you looking at me for? You looking at me? You got a better haircut than I do. They zoom in on me when you talk about I need the haircut, not you. Anyway.
My hunch is he's not spending as much on haircuts as intellectual patents. That's just my guess.
The service jobs are locally rooted. Those service jobs can't be moved away.
Okay.
And we owe it to ourselves to make those jobs good jobs.
But let me put a comment to you that I heard. The Ontario New Democratic Party recently chose a new leader. And the outgoing leader, Howard Hampton, got up there and gave a very fiery speech on his way out the door saying all those laid-off steel workers at fill in the blank can't all go out tomorrow and open art galleries. I mean, he was essentially trying to ridicule, I think, a lot of what you're saying in your prosperity report. He's right, though, isn't he?
When my dad retired from the factory, he went and got a job at a local health club. It was the happiest he ever was in his life. He wasn't fulfilled in his factory job, and let's get over this. Factory jobs pay well, but they aren't necessarily great work. What forced me to go to college, I can tell you, was one summer in the factory. One summer in the factory got me studying as hard as I possibly could. It is now that's not to say that we shouldn't help each and every one of those steel workers and their families to find the best kind of work and to use those skills entrepreneurially, to open their own welding shops or whatever they can do. But to think that it'd be like we're sitting here in 1900 and saying, what are we going to do when all the farms are made more efficient and imagine if only 1% of our workforce works on the farm. How will we possibly survive?
Okay, Sheila wants back at you.
I think that's a bit of an oversimplification, Richard. I think we have some very high value-added traded sector manufacturing jobs that have really been sideswiped by what's been happening in the global economy. I think it's those highly productive jobs that are well paid because they are productive that we do want to continue to support. If we don't support those jobs, nobody's going to be able to afford a haircut.
Jim Balsillie.
But again, that goes back to, and I'm very good at repeating myself. I know a lot of these people who run these companies, and fundamentally, if you spend a bunch of time, even in these great, a lot of these companies, the ones that are thriving and are going to turn around, if they're in a high value-added position, they figured out the rights and rents regimes. They have IPR behind it, and they figured out how to engage in the global context. Whether these, and this is not a comment on the quality of the workers, at the end of the day, if management cannot figure out the rules regimes for a value-added rights and rent structure, you're going to get commoditized in this world. And if you cannot understand the trends that are at play, you're going to get blindsided. And the essence of these things is emerging exponentially, whether it's in rights and rents for IPR, whether it's talking about cap and trade regimes for regulating carbon emissions, That's another regulatory, whether it's something to do with financial regulatory, and that's the whole G20, which is this going to be a global compact where it's foisted and so on. You can talk about Arctic sovereignty, border and hemispheric trade. So I just really, and this is not a comment on the workers and the quality of the work, if the management does not have a structure for defending high value add beyond just good workers, but in terms of the rights and rents regimes, anything that can be commoditized in this world will be commoditized.
Sheila, you want to come back one more time on that?
I think that when we have that kind of enormous productive capacity, if there are problems in management, absolutely we need to bring in new management, but we want to use that productive capacity. And I think it's when you raise the issue around carbon costs, right? The idea that we'll offshore all our production is really a function of not having appropriate carbon costing in there. When we actually get to the point where we are looking at what are the true environmental costs and we actually integrate them as opposed to externalize them, which looks from the Obama administration it's going to be happening, I think we'll be looking at a different
the one last thing in response to that is that you have to train people on these international regulatory regimes so you can engage constructively, legally, and globally, or you'll be taken advantage of.
Okay, let me come over here. We're in the home stretch of the program right now. Mike Miner, want to hear one more time from you about what's happening online, so fill us in, sir.
We have more than 130 people in our chat. We have a lot more than that firing in from Twitter. They're talking about communities and they're talking about the economy mostly. They want to know about how to expand the success beyond Kitchener-Waterloo. They want to know what role culture plays. Fred Sangmuller, he wants to know if, well, he thinks that there's something intrinsic in the innovation economy that keeps people moving around from community to community following jobs. People are also wondering what the economy and the current situation is going to have to do with this. People are wondering if tech can ride the next upswing or if it's making it pretty much impossible to figure out where the change and the innovation is needed.
Okay, Mike, thanks much. Keep the conversation going online and via Twitter. And we've got a question from the crowd here.
Hi there. We've been talking about innovation as though it's primarily about technology, and I'm wondering, given the numbers of unemployment in this area and across the province, given all the challenges being faced by people in different parts of all of our communities at this time, at what point do we start talking about innovation in a broader social sense, a responsibility to take risks and break new ground and do things on a social level, and how should we do that?
John Wilkinson.
Well, one of the great opportunities we have in the 21st century is the fact that we're more interconnected. So the opportunities that will come because of social networking we're just at the cusp of that. You know, when we look at some of the jobs that are going to be in the future, we're transforming ourselves to this green economy so we can live sustainably on our planet. And we're the only species that hasn't figured that out. Well, the opportunities there for manufacturing and for high-tech jobs and in the service industry are all part of that. So it's important that you have inspired public policy. Government has to play its role, helping people retrain to the new jobs and having the right policy that helps drive the economy where society wants it to go.
Minister, can I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
At what age in the Ontario curriculum should we start teaching this notion of risk, innovation, getting these themes around young people's minds?
Well, Steve, have you ever been in a playground? Risk is there. And so I'm just a dad, and I can tell you, sometimes we try to take that out of our children. Children understand that. They love to play games. The ability to try something new, the ability to risk, the ability not to be constrained that we are when we're adults. All we have to do is make sure that we don't actually kind of teach that out of our children. And great teachers are doing that every day. But we have to say risk is something that has to be managed, but it's part of life.
This you spoke about in your report, Richard Florida. Are we educating the risk out of our young people?
You know, when you said that, I think we have to start doing a little earlier. We have to get kids out of, you know, the old bureaucratic, industrial age classroom. I hated school. I'm a professor, and I cannot tell you how much I hated school. I learned about innovation and entrepreneur playing in a rock and roll band. And the other thing, the smartest, most innovative, most creative, most risk-taking entrepreneurial kids I ever met were the working class kids I grew up with. They're smarter than the kids I taught at Carnegie Mellon. They're smarter than the people on the faculty I worked with at MIT. They had that squelched out of them by school systems that couldn't understand their creativity. So I think a little bit more emphasis on letting young people, just like these guys are doing, build their businesses and try stuff out and try it out in a variety of contexts, whatever they want to do, music, sports. Getting them involved and understanding at an early age is the key.
Okay, new question here.
Hi, Steve.
Hi.
This is for Minister Wilkinson. If I presented to you tomorrow someone
coming to you asking for seed money for an idea that originated here in Waterloo or at the campus, and it was for $100,000. And along with that suggestion and body, I produced a welder who needed $200,000 to take advantage of the low price of computerized welding machines in order to supply the excessive demand that he needs to supply for that $200,000 piece of equipment. Who's more likely to get the grant from your program?
The supposition behind your question is what?
No, there's not a supposition. I'm saying that I could produce either one of those tomorrow, either by talking to somebody here at CG or at U of W on the one side, and I can walk out the door and I already have the individual that I've suggested to you. How would your ministry react? That's all I'm asking.
Okay, Minister.
Well, actually, because we've been on this for 4 years, we have a full suite of programs that we can talk to, engage young people, young entrepreneurs who have that spirit. You have to be able to do both. You know, you can't be simplistic about this, that says that when you're helping to be a catalyst within the economy, that there's just one cookie cutter size solution to it. So you have to be able to have both of those things. So we have programs that are available for young entrepreneurs and young researchers that can take an idea, and there's a certain process along commercialization. You have to acquire the rights to your idea to make sure that you own the idea today and in the future and around the world. You need business mentorship. You need a marketing plan. There's a lot of things you need to do. And if you're somebody that needs new skills, that's why we're also focused on making sure that people who've decided that they need new skills, because it has to be their decision, not government's, that the government can be there to act, to help facilitate that. And it's so important today because those are the people that will succeed because they believe in themselves, their ideas, and their abilities. Government's role is to help them be a catalyst. We can't make them do it, but when they want to change, we have to try as best we can to care because that's the root of our future success.
Okay, back here, everybody. You're on.
Hi there, my name is Marco. I have a question. It's been my experience as Canadians, we suffer a little bit from a bit of a crisis of confidence. And I'm just wondering what the panel thinks would be a good way to address that.
Jim Balsillie, let me hear you on that. This notion of a crisis of confidence, we are adverse to risk. You've heard all these things before. Want to speak to it?
Well, that's an illusion. And if you choose to take on illusions in life, you become prisoners of those illusions. And most of our risk aversion is an illusion. In fact, the downside of life is far smaller than you realize, and the upside is far greater. So there's a great asymmetry to sort of embracing life and trusting yourself and doing all you can and trusting your own thinking and trusting your own capacity to engage and navigate. But the system can sometimes be very good at beating that innate celebration out of you. But all I can say, it's an illusion, and it's tragic to be a prisoner to it. And once you see it as an illusion, then you don't get so nervous and you just let it rip.
Richard Florida, you're obviously from the United States originally. We always compare ourselves to the United States, and usually not necessarily in a positive way. We're not risk takers like Americans, et cetera, et cetera. You've been here for a while now. How much truth is there to that?
Well, I think this is a great challenge for Canada right now. And I mean, in the past, it probably was easy to say that because there was lots of opportunity in Silicon Valley or out near the Research Triangle, and Wall Street was blazing, and if you're a young financial whiz kid, but the whole system down there is just broken in pieces. And so right now, the opportunity for Canada is to show that it can be done here. And I think, Steve, it's more than just an opportunity. It's actually an obligation. You know, our banks are standing, our technology community is doing well, we have a social safety net that works. We now have to become a model for the rest of the world because the other models don't work as well as the one we have here.
Question over here, please. Yes, sir.
Hello, John Williams here. It has been said that this is the first generation in human history when parents must turn to their children to learn the skills necessary for survival. My observation is that my children and other children are running circles around their school teachers and the school system. So my question is, how can we quickly and rapidly and efficiently deploy these technologies into the schools so that the children can be a part of this innovation economy?
Good question. Who wants that one? When in doubt, go to the politician.
And I was going to say, my good friend Kathleen Wynne, the Minister of Education, would love to answer that question, but let me take a crack at it. You know, it's amazing as a parent. Our children are innovative. They adapt so quickly, and they're so inspiring for us. And I think for some of us who are a little bit older, it's daunting. But, you know, when I was at Agenda Camp yesterday, I was talking to these young entrepreneurs, and we were talking about how do we actually get this story. I said to the other person who asked the question, if you could see what I see every day, I see the future of this province every day, and it is truly inspiring. And it's hard to get that message out. It's hard to figure out a way to actually reach out across people. But our young people know how to do that. They're actually more interconnected than ever before, and that's a powerful force, and we have to figure out how to tap into that.
Okay, over here, please.
There has been an argument that for Canada's size of 32 million people, there should be more major multinational corporations. I see RIM as being one Canadian brand. Is there a case in this country where we need more of these kinds of major companies to sort of lead the charge?
Okay, Jim Balsillie, how come so few major international Canadian brands out there?
The bench is way too short, and Richard and Roger Martin have done a study on head offices, and I think I'm going to defer to Richard on that one.
You want to take a kick at it? You look at the top 50, I think his is the only name in there for the top 50 brands in the world.
Well, the banks have sure come out recently,
Yeah.
and you know, they rank among the most respected and trusted names in the world. You have a company like Thomson, not shabby, Thomson Reuters, which has a home in Canada as well as a home in the United States. And I think we can do more. I think what's happened in the past is a lot of the entrepreneurial energy in North America got focused in several places in the United States. Now's the opportunity to bring that north. And I think, you know, we're talking about government's role in innovation. I think there's really one thing that government did in Canada that's critical to innovation that we haven't mentioned. Canada opened its borders, and it's kept its borders open. 50% of those Silicon Valley companies that everyone says the envy of the world were founded by a foreign-born person, not a person born in the United States. Well, those people can't get into the United States anymore for a whole variety of reasons. So why not give them a go here, and why not focus that energy on building more of an entrepreneurial innovation economy here? It can be done.
I got 1 minute left. I want to ask you this question, Jim Balsillie. Yes, RIM we know, CG we know, Perimeter Institute is across the road. We are, I think it's fair to say, unaccustomed to seeing wealthier Canadians from the private side putting money into public policy institutes, think tanks, in the way that they do in the United States in a big way. Why don't we do that here?
That's a question that's a very good question. Why don't we give it value? And I don't have a good answer for that. I'm simply trying to articulate that there is enormous value, and in fact, the absence of recognizing that value is our fundamental vulnerability right now. And so it's an enormous privilege to engage with it and be a part of it, and for Canadians to play way bigger on the world stage. The G20 was an idea baked in Canada. It was developed and emerged for 7 years from CG. That's where we were born to work on that. So this is a, you know, BlackBerry and G20 are made in Waterloo things. So I don't have a good answer. I know the U.S. is replete with it. I think societally we have to give way more value to these things.
Let me, in my last 30 seconds, ask one last question, and I'm telling you, everywhere I went in Waterloo over the last few days, people said, you got to be sure to ask this question, so I'm going to. We know that there have been significant efforts undertaken to move a hockey team to this area. So here's my question. Hang on.
Innovative idea.
Hang on. So my question is, when is the McGuinty government going to buy a hockey team and move it up here?
Well, we'll have to negotiate with a great citizen here in Waterloo region.
Okay, enough on that. You're all very good sports to put up with my questions tonight. Thank you so much. I want to remind people watching us at home, you can continue to follow this conversation online at tvo.org/theagenda and on our Agenda Camp wiki. Can I thank our guests, all of whom have come from near and far to be here this evening. Thanks so much, everybody. You got a nice looking bingo parlor here, I got to tell you. This is one hell of a building. Thanks so much, Jim Balsillie, for having us here at CG. Thank the audience as well. I want to thank Sandra Jonas, who produced this program, the Agenda Camp participants yesterday from the University of Waterloo, our viewers and our web chat participants. You can keep the conversation going with Mike Miner, the University of Waterloo, and of course, CG, this quite magnificent hall that has been our home for tonight's broadcast.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin was presented by Vale Inco Limited, a pioneering nickel mining company transforming mineral resources into essential ingredients for everyday life.
Ontario's 33,000 chartered accountants, public policy leaders since 1879. More information is available at casforchange.ca.